Michelle, are you ready?
I was born ready.
She's an award-winning author, speaker, and podcast host who serves on the National Faith Advisory Council. She supported Donald J. Trump for president before it was cool. From her she shed in her beautiful backyard, this is the Michelle Moore Show.
Rising up, took my chances, went the distance, will to survive. So many times you trade your passion for glory. Don't lose your grip, keep them alive. And he's watching us all with the eye.
Face to face, out in the heat, hanging tough, staying hungry. Days like the odds, still we take to the street for skill, with the skill to survive. It's cheap, eye of the tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rivals. And the last no survivors, watch us spreading the night, and he's watching us all with the eye of the tiger.
And he's watching us all with the eye.
Hello, everybody. So glad that you're here with us today. All right. So a couple of quick notes before we get into today's guest. Jack and Margie Flynn, they did the Red Pill Expo back in June. They have provided the video. We have it now in the link and everything hosted on our Rumble channel for you if you want to go and see it. The link to it is in today's show description. If you want to go on ahead and make a note to see that later after today's show, that'll be good. They did a great presentation, and so it's there for you. I've had many people ask for it. So if you go to the Rumble channel for the Michelle Moore Show, either on Tuesday when they were on with me or today, we've put it in both show descriptions for you, okay? Also, just a quick note, Mike Gill will be here tomorrow. I will not be here tomorrow, but Mike Gill will be. And so he will be doing a show for you guys and information, covering all kinds of stuff. You know how he does. So he's going to be here for you. And so excited about today. I did not know. I'm going to be interested to see if you guys knew this. But did you know that there was a woman who tried to report about there being a plot to kill JFK? She tried to tell doctors. She tried to tell the police. All different kinds of stuff. And she was connected to Jack Ruby, the assassin of the supposed JFK assassin. So this is so interesting. And her name, her alias at the time, she was going by Rose Cherami. So we have Michael Marcades, and he is her son, her birth son, her only child, and he is here with us. He's 71 years old now, and he has had a lifelong journey of trying to kind of put together, unpack, and everything, her life story and what all happened. And so it's so interesting, so many details. And of course, he has had numerous conversations, probably really endless, about, with other people that were investigating. And I've spoken with other JFK people. I've got a gentleman who is a retired FBI agent, and he's done extensive JFK research, going to be here next Thursday. And he knew Michael, and he knew about Rose Cherami's story. And so it's just so interesting because there is a whole group of people that, really spent so much time and so many resources. Obviously, we know about the movies, right? So I've had to watch a few movies. And in fact, Michael's mother, Rose, she was actually featured in the beginning scenes of the JFK movie, the one that Oliver Stone did, and not too many years ago. And so it's just very interesting. Of course, that movie had Kevin Costner in it and many other well-known actors. And so she's featured in it. She is the woman that they start out in the beginning of the movie being pushed out a moving car. And so anyways, so it's so very interesting. And we've got Michael here with us today. I had a personal friend who introduced Michael and myself. She used to live in Texas and in the Dallas area. And so she knew Michael and did the introduction. And so this has been in the works. I'm very excited about it. I felt like the Holy Spirit really had been showing me that now was finally the time. I kept feeling like it wasn't the time. It wasn't the time. I knew that I had numerous stories. I've met more people. We're going to have other insiders and people who have spent just all kinds of time and resources into researching the assassination of JFK. So we're going to go on ahead and bring Michael in. I'm very excited about having him today. So Michael, thank you so much for being here with us.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So Michael, I want to start. So your mother, Rose, was the one who was trying to tell doctors, police, everybody about this plot, this plan to kill the president. And she had all of these details and everything. And we're going to talk about that. But I want to kind of back it up just a hair. There's a lot of information and details to your childhood that are quite jaw-dropping. But let's kind of back it up just a hair and talk about your mother. And so, she had some problems. And so why don't you talk about that?
Yes. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to honor my mother today. Yes, my mother, Melba Christine Youngblood Marcades, known as Rose Cherami, did have problems actually from childhood. At the age of 12, she contracted an acute case of encephalitis. And I don't know about you or your audience, but I had to go look that up and see what that meant. But it's an infection in the brain. She was actually hospitalized for most of a month, fever the entire month. And when she was finally released, doctors warned my grandparents that they needed to keep their eyes on her and that she might have some unusual personality quirks. Then said, above all, please keep her away from alcohol and drugs. And of course, that didn't happen. But I think that's an important thing to note about her early childhood. She, I love my family, but I don't think my mother was very happy when she was growing up. She was the middle child. She was the black sheep among her siblings. She had an older sister, a younger sister, and a brother who died shortly after birth. So she was rebellious. She was hard to tie down. If she saw a fence, she thought it was something she should climb over.
I like that. Well, one of the things that I noticed in reviewing everything for today's show is that she ran away when she was 16.
Correct. Actually, that was the second time she ran away. She ran away a couple of years earlier and, wasn't quite so skilled at that. And then by the time she was 16, she figured out a way to make it stick. And as a 16-year-old young woman, she was beautiful, by the way. She was very fun-loving, flirtatious, and all of that sometimes got her in trouble. But she went away to Houston, which wasn't that far away from the tenant farm that my grandparents were running at the time, north of Houston. And like any 16-year-old girl, she didn't have a whole lot of choices when she was in Houston about how to support herself. She wound up getting involved in drug use, drug distribution, prostitution, and oddly, she wound up connected to the Houston Police Department in a very unusual way. She became an informant for them, for Detective Billnitzer, William Billnitzer of the Houston Police Department, who was in charge of all the drug issues in Houston area, which were great. And Mother, and it's all been documented. By the way, I want your audience to know that I'm not making stuff up. I have lived by documentation to write this book. It's the only way to find truth. But she had worked as an informant for Billnitzer, met with him regularly. But the federal government wound up investigating the Houston Police Department for wrongdoings relating to drugs coming in the front door and being resold out the back door. Billnitzer was at the head of all of that. And at some point, he thought he was in such trouble that he wound up committing suicide in his office in the Houston Police Department. And the death record, the accounting of what happened to him was he supposedly shot himself twice in the exact location. Yeah, that doesn't sound like suicide to me. So, but that was Mother's entree into walking both sides of the fence. She became very skilled at providing information. She lived till she was almost 42 years old in this really seedy world, and I think she became very skilled at surviving.
Okay. So let's, and obviously it was a complicated situation between her and your grandparents.
Yes.
So early on, she meets your father. So she's into drugs. She's obviously, working as a prostitute. She's being taken all over the country, it sounds like. And so talk a little bit about that, the time that is before she met your father that led up to her meeting your father.
Well, she became, New Orleans kind of became, as I mentioned to you earlier, kind of a mecca for her. Whenever she had a chance to leave a certain place after troubles, she seemed to always float back to New Orleans. Between Houston, Dallas, and New Orleans, there was lots of prostitution and drugging going on. Of course, they were well based in the New Orleans area, and we also know that Lee Harvey Oswald was well based in that area. And the connection with Jack Ruby is also connected to New Orleans and Dallas. So she, I was thinking earlier today, she didn't just wake up a drug addict, drug trafficker, prostitute for the mob. It was one step at a time. So it took time, but, from her age 19 forward, she spent quite a bit of time in and out of jail for stealing cars, for running drugs, and for doing prostitution.
Okay. Yeah, it was very interesting. And so, and of course it's been, I thought this was interesting. You, just so that the viewers know, you provided a 24-page, really very detailed bullet point list of all different kinds of facts and different details about your mother, the circumstances, and all of these different players. And so it's very good, very well done. But one of the things that I've highlighted a few things, and one of the things I want the audience to know is that Michael is actually well known within the worldwide JFK assassination community, of course, as the son of Rose Cheramy. I had not heard of her before, but what I have come to learn in my own research and preparing for these upcoming weeks, talking about the Kennedy assassination and people who have done their own incredible work, lifetime journey of working and digging and all the different circumstances. It's very interesting because they all know about Rose. And so next week's guest, when I brought it up, oh yeah, you're talking about Rose Cheramy. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. But she was a mysterious character and is depicted in Oliver Stone's film, the JFK film, like we talked about. And I thought that was interesting, that she even had a part. So this isn't like, oh, we've just, found somebody that nobody knows anything about. It's not that. Rose tried to warn law enforcement authorities, doctors, nurses, and others about this ahead of time. It was well documented, and we have the names of all of those people as well. So it's, and of course, he's got a book, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's interesting too, because the JFK, I would say, just that whole community, the assassination community, they've had conferences. You've been interviewed numerous times and on numerous international podcasts as well. So I just want my audience to have a little bit of background on that as well. So I want to move on. I thought that it was, it's obvious that, so at one point she meets your father. And so talk a little bit about your birth father and how they met, where they met, and what happened there.
Yes, at the time she met my dad, he was in the Navy and living in New Orleans, of course, his entire life, except when he was serving, of course. And my dad met her on Bourbon Street. She was serving as a headliner for a men's club called the Blue Angel. And as part of my research, I've actually been to that location and visited with people. It's under a different name now, but the Blue Angel is well remembered as one of the finest, if you can use that word, for what the men's clubs on Bourbon Street. My dad went to that club, saw mother, dancing, swinging on swings, all kinds of things. It's quite an interesting place, that area on Bourbon Street, and pretty taken with her. She was a short little bombshell, only about 5'4" and he was just captivated by her, and in a really good way. Of course, I'm sure he was drawn to her sensuality, but after meeting my dad, I really found out that he just deeply fell in love with her, wanted to take care of her, wanted to give her an opportunity for real life. One of the nights that he saw her, he talked her into going home with him. He went to his house where his mother lived, and mother wound up staying there for quite a while and still working on Bourbon Street. But he was well aware of her issues in life, her attraction to drugs, the prostitution, and of course the Blue Angel, but he was offering her a chance at normal life.
Oh, wow. Okay. It doesn't work out. So even though she gets married, she has you, she keeps staying at the Blue Angel, working there. And at some point it doesn't work out. They get a divorce. And in the documents, you end up finding out at 38 years old, he shows you, when you meet him, proof that even shows that he was not allowed to contact you. So you lived your life not having met your father. He was not in the picture.
Correct. And, honestly, I love my family, but I never have really understood why they didn't clue me in on all this, because I lived my life up to almost 40 years of age thinking that he literally did not care enough to track me down. And once I saw him, I'll never forget meeting him at the airport. He was just like hovering off up against the wall. My half brothers greeted me, and he was hovering back against the wall like he was scared to approach me. And I can't imagine what he was feeling at the moment. But when we got to his house, he drugged me to the bedroom, opened a drawer, and pulled out the divorce papers. And he said, "Look here, see, I want you to know that your mother demanded in our divorce proceedings that I completely stay away from you and never contact you."
Okay.
So that was important to learn.
So because of those circumstances, that then led you to live with your grandparents.
Yes.
And so, which is your mother's parents. And there are some interesting details that come out about all of this. But, at what point do you end up finding out her role in all of this with the Kennedy assassination and her trying to warn the authorities, warn the doctor, the nurses, all of these different people in these different places? At what point do you and your family find out that she tried to do all of that?
Actually, it was almost 30 years ago. I received a phone call from my aunt and uncle who lived in North Dallas. That was one of my mother's sisters. And I remember her relaying to me, she said, "Mike, some man has called, a couple of men have called, and they say they have pertinent information about your mother and some things that they want to share with us to keep us all safe. And that they're going to meet with us at X time, X place." So, we made arrangements. I remember going over to my aunt's house in North Dallas, and the men that I met was Gary Shaw, who is literally I didn't know who he was then, but he is literally respected as one of the world's top assassination researchers. He's been doing it for 60 years, but to me, he was just a man at the time, and another gentleman, another detective investigator called Joe West. But that day, I'll never forget that day, sitting in my aunt and uncle's living room around their fireplace, Gary Shaw revealed these basic facts about Mother working for the mob, working for Jack Ruby, prostitution, drug rings, etc., and about an experience she had outside of Eunice, Louisiana, where she ended up being jailed and then later taken to East Louisiana State Hospital and divulging what she knew to Lieutenant Francis Fruget, who was in charge of drug enforcement for Louisiana, state trooper. And she told him everything she knew, that she had been traveling with two men who were en route to Dallas to assassinate the president. And of course, she was in and out of a sedative, but Fruget says she was quite lucid when she was speaking. And of course, he basically blew off what she was saying and chalked it up as her reactions to the sedative and her need for heroin. But of course, that was November 21 when he was riding with her to East Louisiana State Hospital. And the next day, of course, Kennedy was assassinated. And then his opinion about her story changed drastically.
Okay. So he finds out that Kennedy has been assassinated, and he's like, holy cow, I was just yesterday with old Rose Jeremy, and she's telling me stuff that I blew off. So he calls the hospital, goes to the hospital, only to find out that she has left.
Yes.
And
he
so
immediately, of course, as soon as Kennedy was assassinated, he recontacted the hospital. And my mother had a way of disappearing really skillfully. She seemed to walk between the raindrops for a lot of her life. And so by the time he had called, she was already long gone. So.
Wow. All right. So how long did it take then? Did he ever find her, or how did?
He never did find her. In fact, not till years later, when he was involved in Jim Garrison's investigation with Ann Dishler, he did some research in Eunice, Louisiana at the Silver Slipper, which was a prostitution drug ring location in Eunice, well known. But he went back and discovered everything that all the details that Mother had told him were accurate. She identified the exact men who were with her. Sergio Arcacho Smith and Emilio Santana. I mean, everything she had said was true, but of course he was not able to locate her immediately after the assassination.
Okay. So there was nobody looking for her other than him, or did he get anybody else to look for her? Or is this really just a Gary, is this just Gary's thing that then when you met them?
Mother, even before she was released, authorities, Fruget didn't just keep it to himself. He also contacted people in Dallas, said, hey, I've got this woman who, I've talked to this woman who thinks Kennedy's about to be assassinated. Said, no, we're not interested in any of that information. Even afterwards, we're not interested. We have our man. We know what we're doing. So it's all pretty odd. At the same time that she was ignored, given her lifestyle.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, the more that I learned about her and her connections with Ruby and Oswald. So, and of course being put in the hospital where it was a well-known hospital that actually contributed to MK Ultra programming. A lot of these hospitals, just in case someone's watching and doesn't know this, I have interviewed other MK Ultra survivors, and they have shared that. They've shared even being taken to hospitals when their programming starts to break down in their, early to mid 20s, for example. And it's really not supposed to start breaking down until about 30. And so they take you in for reprogramming. And that's usually a lot of times at a hospital that will even have a sign out front that says Christian hospital. And so we've had numerous people who have been on the other side of that who have said, look, I was being raped and drugged at places that claim to be Christian hospitals all over the country. And so I've had some different interviews about that. It's very interesting. And so when I found out about that connection, I thought, uh-oh. So this is interesting. Do you think that at some point she was MK Ultra'd?
You know, my first response is yes. I believe the main goal was to control Mother, and I think that people who were handling her would do anything they had to do. You know, Central State Hospital, as you just mentioned, in Norman, Oklahoma, was a central location for MK Ultra experimentation, and I have no doubt, although I have not been able to find the records for her there, I have gotten her admittance card that proves she was indeed there. At the same time that Lee Harvey Oswald was there. So, but I just know that Mother was subjected initially to electrical shock.
Oh, we're kind of losing you. Oh. I think Michael has a little bit, he doesn't necessarily have fiber optic. I'm sure he doesn't do an interview every day. So I'm sure he'll come right back in. But I think it's very interesting when I got to looking at this story and really digging into it. Let's see. So she was at a hospital. She was in and out of the prison system, and that's a whole nother thing. But then you also had, and it just is mind blowing to me what was going on even in the 60s. So, you know, but she was, it turns out at some point was in a hospital that was known for doing mind control. She was, you know, there at the same time Oswald was there, which was interesting. Not really sure what Oswald was doing there. So we'll have to find out about that when he comes back. And then also she had connection with Jack Ruby. And so I'm going, holy moly. And a lot of where this New Orleans thing, you know, and all of the taking people from one city to another, and just so happens one of the states that they took and transported prostitutes and drugs was to Texas, of all places. And so, of course, we know Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, but I thought that was very interesting as well. And so there were just so many check marks by this story and all of his details and facts, and of course his book. And, you know, it's just so much. And his story intertwines with his own research with so many people that are so well known in this whole JFK assassination community. There's an entire community. And so it's just been very interesting to learn about Rose, and also all of these connections that she has, which I thought was interesting. Okay, I see him coming back up. So let's pull him back in, Ron. And so he's muted, Ron. So if you'll unmute him. Michael, can you hear us? Oh, he's muted again. And so, Michael, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Michael? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
We just don't see you, but that's fine. And so what I was going to say is, do you know why Lee Harvey Oswald was at that hospital? You're muted again. Not sure why he's muted. Producer Ron, can you unmute his mic? It may be on, he's muting himself. So is what producer Ron is saying. Michael, if you could hear us, you're muting yourself so we don't hear you. There you go. Michael, are you there? Michael, are you there?
Kelly, I need your help.
Michael, are you there? I think there's a little bit of a drag with his internet.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, now we can. So why was Lee Harvey Oswald there at that hospital? Do you know, was he working there as an employee?
Okay.
What was the deal?
Good. I'm trying to get the cam on.
It's okay if you can't. It's not a big deal. We could, as long as we can hear you.
I can't confirm that. Work there.
There you
Some
go.
connections with what? Oh, there you go. Can you see me now?
Well, we did. Now we don't.
I'll get it.
Okay, Michael. So you're not sure why he was there at the hospital?
I'm not sure. I just know that was a center. I believe Norman, Oklahoma was a center for mob activities. I can't prove that, but that's what I think.
Okay, that's interesting. So 200T asks, did Rose communicate with reporter Dorothy Kilgallen, who died mysteriously investigating the JFK murder?
No, she did not.
Okay. All right.
No, she was in communications with Jack Ruby.
Okay, Dorothy was? Or Rose?
Okay, there we are.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
Who was in connection with Jack Ruby?
You mean beyond Oswald?
No, you were saying she was in connection with Jack Ruby. Are you talking about Dorothy? Dorothy was?
Dorothy Kilgallen. She was the Dallas reporter who wound up interviewing Jack Ruby in his jail cell. And, right after her interview, she came out and to the public said, I'm about to blow this Kennedy assassination wide open. And of course, it wasn't that long after that Dorothy Kilgallen was no longer living.
Wow. Okay. Didn't know about that. Hadn't heard of her part of the story. Wow. That's interesting. So Nelson Mark 83 says every time new information comes out about the JFK assassination, it just makes the whole thing even more mysterious. It's wild how deep this rabbit hole goes. So while I was watching a movie called Grassy Knoll, I thought it was very interesting talking about Nelson Mark 83 saying that. I thought it was interesting to hear that Jack Ruby had come out saying, look, there's just you're never going to really hear why this happened. And so I thought that was interesting as well. There's another part that I didn't know Oswald had a girlfriend. So that was a whole nother thing that was interesting to me in the Grassy Knoll movie. But then also, you had said that there was a point where it was reported that Rose had said that she knew that Ruby and Oswald knew both of them. And as confirmed by the testimony by Fruge before the House Select Committee on Assassinations, Rose knew well Ruby and Oswald and declared that the two of them knew each other well, and Rose said that they had been shacking up together for years. So Rose was saying there was a romantic relationship, I guess is the way to put that, between Ruby and Oswald.
Yes, that's correct. Actually, she was on a flight with Francis Fruge to the Galveston area to confirm some details that she had relayed about drug exchange, drugs coming into the port, etc. And she saw a newspaper that said Jack Ruby doesn't know Lee Harvey Oswald. And she, according to what Fruge said in his testimony before the HSCA, she said, wow, what a joke. They not only know each other, but they have been shacking up together for years. And, as the JFK film implied, I think there was some unusual sexuality connections going on between all of those individuals.
Yeah. Okay. I want to go back to the Silver Slipper too. This is where she was working. And I thought it was interesting because something grabbed my attention in my own research through the books I'm reading and different people I'm speaking to, including yourself and some others that you know about that I'm in communications with. It was interesting because I didn't know until I watched the Grassy Knoll. Again, another thing that I didn't know was that Lee Harvey Oswald had some connections in, I guess it was the New Orleans area, but it had to do with the Castro-Cuban stuff going on. And I think it was like a year prior to Kennedy being assassinated. And so when I got to looking through your notes, you're talking about Smith and Santana, you were saying they're well-known pimps. She was traveling with them, your mother, Rose, and said that they regularly hauled prostitutes from Florida to Louisiana and Texas. And it said Smith was known to have been part of that anti-Castro-Cuban revolution. I thought that was interesting because that was a red
Yes.
flag, because I just happened to know that about Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yes, and I just can't stress enough to you the importance of New Orleans in all of this. New Orleans was a central connection for lots of characters, anti-Cuban, etc. Guy Bannister, Clay Shaw, that whole scene was located right there in the heart of New Orleans.
So do you think that some of that has to do with the mob? And I'm thinking so, because there's obviously, you've got drugs, prostitution, you got a bunch of money. And of course, it's all with the mob. And then I know that the mob helped, even there's reports of the mob helping elections and stuff, like Kennedy supposedly got helped by the mob to make sure that he won that election. Supposedly,
Right.
there was reports and things I've seen on that through the years. So the mob being involved in all of this, I think it's all very interesting. And so, but when I saw that as another connection with Oswald and those guys and your mother. So another thing to say, okay, yeah, they clearly knew each other. So she rode, by the way, your mother rode in an ambulance with this gentleman, Fruge, and so he was the guy who was over narcotics. And so he was a Louisiana state trooper with the narcotics division. And so that's when she was telling him over and over, and she had been trying to tell the doctor as well. His name was Durowen. And so some of these names are a little bit, okay.
All right.
Derouen. And so she
Yes.
told both of them, the doctor was Durowen and of course, Fruge, who we were just talking about. But I thought that was interesting. But of course, they're just thinking, well, she's, a drug addict and she's needing drugs and she's going through the DTs and whatever. And so it's interesting with all of that. And so, so are you saying then that once Kennedy was assassinated, President Kennedy was assassinated, how was it that Gary ended up finding out about your mother? Who did he talk to that had talked with your mother? Was that Fruge?
Well, I'd have to go back and ask Gary that, but I just know in his 60 years of research, that he has turned over every possible stone for connections. That's all I know to tell you about that.
Okay, so he ends up finding that out, and that's why he connects your family. Okay,
yes,
so
there's so many incongruences. We haven't talked much about her death yet, and all the weird facts stated on her death certificate that were complete contradiction of each other. But I mean, she was taken to that her death scene in and of itself, according to some researchers, has actually been described in CIA manuals. So, you and I talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, a lot going on there. And it's believed that she was murdered.
Yes, ma'am. Although it was covered up really for 50 years. And honestly, if I hadn't done my research and my work in acquiring her medical records from the Gladewater Municipal Hospital, I don't think it would have ever been thought of anything other than an auto car accident, which certainly is not what happened to you. I believe that scene on FM 155 in East Texas was staged. I believe she was shot in the head. Her medical records prove that she had a punctate stellate wound to the right forehead, which every physician that I have talked to said, wow, that's a close range gunshot wound. So, but none of this was shared with my family. Her death certificate says that she was dead on arrival in 3 places, yet I uncovered 8.5 hours of minute-by-minute care given to her at the Gladewater Hospital. Now, what is it? Is she dead on arrival, or did you give her care? And she had a broken forearm. They set her forearm. Normally you don't set set a broken limb of a person who's already dead. So there's just all kinds of conflicting information in the medical records.
Also, just so that everybody knows, she shows up dead a year and 10 months after Kennedy's assassination, roughly. So just so you kind of get an idea of how long she lived after the assassination took place. Now, you had mentioned that she had come in and was it questioning that she had a meeting and you think it was determined then at that point that she was going to be assassinated? Talk about that a little bit.
I think her experience shortly in August of before Kennedy was assassinated. Mother was on a major trip from New Orleans all the way into Montgomery, Alabama, where, she was, believe it or not, she was very trusted. She was in a vehicle that had thousands of dollars worth of cash stashed in the doors, and she was hauling around a group of women on prostitution team. And so she doled out drugs and collected money. And then when she got to Montgomery, she was in charge of all the activities that were going on there at the Exchange Hotel and the Jefferson Davis Hotel. And while she was there, she noticed some individuals in the lobby of the hotel where she was staying that she knew were bad characters. And she really felt like they were following her, trying to figure out, was she divulging information to authorities? And she got so scared that she actually contacted the local FBI right there in Montgomery. They did come visit with her. She went to a local drugstore. She secluded herself in an old-timey phone booth until the FBI agents showed up. They talked to her there, took her to the station as well. And she divulged lots of information about what was going on. And I believe that was literally the beginning of the end for her, because less than a month later, she was dead.
Oh, goodness. All right. So I had a gentleman on my show last year. He went by the name The Liaison. Okay. He was a whistleblower. And I had already spoken with you. And so we had our first conversation. So I asked him about protected neighborhoods, okay, because you had talked about it with me in our conversations, and I'd never heard of that. So when I spoke with the liaison, I don't think we brought it up in the interview, but I certainly talked to him about it in our initial conversation. And I thought it was an interesting response. And what he said was, he's always yes or no. I got an answer on everything but protected neighborhoods. What he said was, Miss Michelle, I can not deny that, but I cannot confirm that. So your grandparents end up living in a protected neighborhood. So you had so let's kind of back up. Rose, as you all know, was the middle of three girls. The older sister's name was Grace, and she married somebody who ended up being a lieutenant colonel. And so Lieutenant Colonel Stewart. So that was out of Alexandria, which is real close to DC. So, okay, that's interesting. You said he had Pentagon clearance. So all very interesting. He ends up coming home, they end up coming home and living with your grandparents. You were living with your grandparents, still a young boy. And then a year later, they end up moving to a neighborhood. And later, as an adult, you have these friends that you made as a child in this neighborhood. And so share what you end up finding out.
Yes, it's very interesting. You alluded to the fact that my grandparents and I were living with my aunt and uncle, Lieutenant Colonel Jackson W. Stewart. He was Pentagon cleared, as you said. Oddly, they moved from Virginia to Richardson, bought a house. We lived with them for quite a while, for a solid year. Then we moved with my grandparents, just my grandparents and I moved to a very unusual neighborhood out in the woods, literally outside of Duncanville, Texas. Now, of course, I had no idea about that entire sequence of events, but only a few years ago, and I'm certainly not going to call anybody's names because I actually think people are still fearful about sharing information. All I know is I learned about 2 years ago that there was a family near the house where we lived in that secluded area who knew we were coming long before we got there. They knew that these older people were bringing a young boy named Mike, and that they were supposed to watch out for him. And the little neighborhood where we lived out in the middle of the woods was a U-shaped single street, probably no more than 20 houses in that area. I also learned that my grandfather may have had a connection with the father of my friends who lived down the street, who really took good care of me. And I have not been able to get to the bottom of that. But one way or the other, the man down the street secured the very small house for us to live in. And it was literally out of the way. And that's one of the very last places where I remember seeing my mother. She drove up unannounced, hopped out of a yellow cab, and was there with us for a few days, and then she was gone. And then she was truly gone, as in no longer living. So it's so sad.
Okay. So you're saying your mother visited that home?
Yes.
So
she
when
was
Kennedy
at the time. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so when Kennedy was assassinated, do you happen to know what the time frame was between Kennedy's assassination and when the uncle and the aunt came to live there, the lieutenant colonel uncle?
It was at least, it was somewhere but less than 2 years. Okay. Because we had moved from Houston to the Richardson area and then to the outside of Duncanville secluded area. So, I mean, mother only lived a couple of years after, you know, as you mentioned, 100.
Yeah. About a year and 10 months.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. A Love of Shoes says that she was likely initially involved in the MK Ultra programming originally, and the illness was cover. She said, and goes on to say that the mob and military intelligence, as well as government, were and are deeply connected. And so that's true. So that's what we're kind of connecting. She even wrote that before we even talked about much of the brother-in-law, or the uncle. She's your uncle. And so it's very interesting. Is the lieutenant colonel and your Aunt Grace, are they still alive?
No, they're not. But, you know, it's interesting to also note at some point in mother's life, and it's completely unexplainable to me, mother was sent to St. Elizabeth's Mental Hospital in Washington, D.C. You know, a nobody prostitute heroin addict sent for care in Washington, D.C. St. Elizabeth's is the United States military's elite mental hospital. Explain to me now why she was sent there from a crime she committed in Louisiana. Makes no sense to me at all. But she was there for a solid 2 years. My uncle was the only person allowed to visit with her. You know, I cannot prove this, but I have a feeling my uncle knew a lot more of what was going on than he ever shared with our family. Wow,
there's a lot going on there.
Yes.
That's a lot to take in. Ann Bell 25 says, I grew up in a huge, I grew up by a huge mental health institution in Iowa, and my friends that worked there would say that a lot of patients would come in and talk about the CIA. It all makes sense now. Yeah. So sounds like to me, it's probably also, I've got a lady that was born into the Illuminati, and they killed her birth mother during her birth. And she was the one that clued me in initially about these hospitals throughout the country. And then, of course, being part of the MK Ultra program. And then, of course, you've got Mike Gill, who's come along. And in over a year, I've been working with him. And he's been explaining a lot about, the youth detention centers and all different kinds of mental health institutions and stuff, and hospitals and and drug rehab centers. And so you think, oh, you're going to go there, and now they're owned by the cartel and all of these crazy, entities that are no good either. And so anyway, okay. So it says, Michael, how old were you when your mother was murdered?
Yeah, I was 12 years old, seventh grader. In living in Texas, and it was a very mysterious time. My family, we didn't get a lot of answers, and my family didn't ask a lot of questions. If I had taken one look at the death certificate, I would have been full of questions. But in their defense, I have to say they must have just been emotionally exhausted from dealing with mother, and it was just such a long, sad road for her. I mean, your sister in Angola prison at 19, in 7 mental hospitals, declared mentally incompetent, heroin. I mean, it goes on and on, so only as an adult did I figure out the weary state of their minds and spirits regarding my mother. But, they should have asked questions while the iron was hot, if you ask me.
One of the things
that told them about the gunshot wound to the forehead. Nobody mentioned anything about being shot in the forehead. Poor Jerry Don Moore, the man who picked her up off the side of the road, was blamed for running over mother. And actually he was an angel who came along in the middle of the night and picked her up off the road and took her to the hospital.
Mm. All right. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was in your notes to me, you talked about all of this that's been going on and all of it, which has been a lifelong impact on you. And so explain that a little bit. Share that if you would.
Yes, even talking to you today, I'm still grieving and sad about it. I feel so robbed. Here I am, a 71-year-old man, and I feel so robbed. I didn't get to have my mom. Lost her when I was 12. She was very, very seldom even talked about. So it's just so sad. And for me to uncover the seedy existence that she maintained in order to stay alive and to protect me. I'm convinced that much of the reason that she continued doing what she was doing was that there was no way out. She couldn't stop. In fact, there was a short period of time where I believe she was in FBI witness protection program in Cape Canaveral. It was only for a few months, but I remember she wrote my grandmother, and I have those handwritten letters, saying that she had married a man named Gene Crawford and that they were on the dole with the government. They were getting checks from the government for the rest of their lives. Now people like Gary Shaw tell me that sounds like she was on a witness protection program. She didn't stay there. Some of her associates did stay there and live long lives. Mother did not choose to do that and had a very short life. But, it is just so sad in a way. I just feel so robbed. Of course, who knows what my life would have been like if she lived, and I'm so grateful for my loving, dedicated grandparents who took me into their house at the age of 5 when they were in their 60s.
Yeah. Rumble Tumble 20 says, I was born in the 50s. My parents would not have asked questions either. They were likely taught that the doctors and the law were always right. It's a great point, Rumble Tumble 20. And like you said, I think that you have a great point, Michael. Probably just exhausted. Some of the different things that I remember you explaining to me in our first conversation, where she'd show up, she'd be gone. She'd show up, she'd be gone. It was always something else. And so, there's just no telling. There's probably a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and all of that, mixed in with like what Rumble Tumble 20 is talking about. And who knows what the aunt and uncle too, and all of that and what was going on that maybe you didn't even know about. And, because why be moved to a protected neighborhood? So I thought that was interesting.
Who knows?
Very interesting. Well, I appreciate you being here with us today and sharing your mother's very interesting story from what you've been able to pull together and be able to show. This is your book Michael has had 2 different versions of this book. This is his updated version. And so it is Gathering, what is it? Fallen Roses or Fallen Petals? And I actually
Rose Jeremy Gathering Fallen Petals.
Yes. And so I thought there was something interesting in here that I read, and I wanted to share it with the audience. It's in the introduction, and it says, so it's written by Gary Shaw, and I get to looking at it, and he wrote the introduction. It says, what did Rose know? And so I thought that was interesting. He says, she knew and had worked for Jack Ruby, who was an assassin of the alleged assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. She had seen Lee Oswald in the company of Jack Ruby, a bothersome circumstance the investigating authorities categorically denied, even in the face of numerous corroborating witnesses, which goes back to her seeing that newspaper article that you mentioned. She knew firsthand of Ruby's association with men connected to organized crime. Again, a disconcerting connection the authorities knew, but knowingly lying to the American people, denying. And so the next one is she knew and had been in company with 2 men prior to the assassination and had heard them say that they were on their way to Dallas to kill the president. The next one is she had expressed her knowledge of these men, their names, and the intention, and Rose had done this while in the presence of a law officer and several hospital personnel 2 days prior to the assassination. Another one was that she again warned that the president was going to be killed in Dallas, this time as she was watching the TV account of the president, of the beginning of President Kennedy's motorcade. And as previously she had done so in the presence of the hospital personnel. The next one is sometime later, when told of the remarkably quick arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald, she asked hospital personnel if the authorities had already arrested Jack Ruby. Wow, that's interesting. And so it's very interesting story. Lots of stuff. The book is amazing. This is you with your mother when you were a newborn baby. This book has all different kinds of stuff in it. The deposition, photocopies. You have put a lot into this, Michael, and it's an absolutely just riveting book. And I appreciate you sharing it. If somebody wants to order the book, you can get it either on Amazon or you can go to the website. And so the website, share the website address.
It's PenielUnlimited.com, PENIEL Unlimited.com. And if you're interested in autograph books, that's the place to go. And I'd be delighted to do that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great, Michael. We put the link also in today's show description.
Amazon is there for everybody.
Yes. And we put the link I had producer Ron put the link in today's show description for everybody as well. So if you need it, you can get it there as well. Rumble Tumble 20 says, Michael, I'm so sorry that you didn't get the closure that you deserved with your mom. And Sea Monkey 54 said, God's blessing on you, Michael. And so that's so sweet. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Michael, for being with us. All right. Well, like I said earlier in the show at the very beginning, we're going to have Mike Gill here tomorrow. I like to call him America's whistleblower. And so he's going to be here. Y'all know him. Y'all love him. And so he'll be here tomorrow. And I'll see you right here Monday with Mark. Remember, Mark Taylor's going to be here on Monday. And I've got quite the treat planned for Tuesday. And so we're just going to have a great week next week, too. All right. We'll see you right here next time on The Michelle Moore Show.
I'm Dr. Fulgens. For over 30 years, UCB has helped customers strengthen portfolios with gold. But let them tell you in their own words.
Buying gold and silver from Universal Coin and Bullion has been one of the greatest experiences for me, and it's been an easy process and also a very safe process to do that.
Call now to secure your 1-ounce gold or silver American Eagle coin with no dealer markup.
Did you know your cell phone emits radiation that has been linked to increased risk of certain types of cancers? This is why manufacturers include hidden warnings to keep your phone away from your body. And what's worse is that children are more susceptible to the potentially damaging effects. Safe Sleep for cell phones is a case specifically designed to block radiation. Its shielding technology integrated into the case has been tested in a third-party FCC-accredited lab to block over 99% of RF and 92% of ELF radiation emitted by your phone. It also functions as a stand for watching videos and comes in a magnetically detachable style for some devices. Safe Sleeve also offers anti-radiation cases for tablets and laptops and has free shipping in the U.S. plus discounted worldwide shipping is available. Go to truthtalkamerica.com today and click on the Safe Sleep banner on the home page. Use the discount code FIRST10 at checkout for 10% off your first order.
Are you tired of all the pills in your medicine cabinet? I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the creator of the Wave Watch, a more natural approach with 1,000 frequencies for mind and body. People have used the Wave Watch for kidney stones, arteries, blood, immune system, vagus nerve, myocarditis, allergies, colds and flu, ADD and ADHD, strokes, Parkinson's, carpal tunnel, thyroid, Lyme disease, and so much more. Wave Watch has a 1-year manufacturer's warranty for defects and flaws, and you can also upgrade to an additional warranty for water damage and breakage. Are you tired of all your pills and endless trips to the pharmacy? Why not try the Wave Watch with 1,000 different self-care ideas and put your mind at ease?
Just go to wavewatch.com. At checkout, use the code Michelle100 to receive $100 savings on your purchase.
For Michelle's social media links, go to MichelleMooreShow.com.